Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alive with Chris Austin, Illuminating Humanity. It's another Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, so we are here, and I am excited to introduce to you my guest for this evening. And before I bring up my guest for this evening, I'm going to wait a couple minutes as people tend to join a little bit after 7 o'clock. And as we're waiting for people to join, I'm also going to share to some different groups on here. So I'm going to do that right now so that we can get a bigger audience. And as always, the best way that you can support me is also go ahead and share this on your timeline. Share this on your timeline, share it with your friends, because it's a great way to support. So with that being said, I'm really excited about tonight's guest because I got to see a little bit of her journey within the last year and everything that she is up to. So with no further ado, I would love to bring on tonight's guest, Halley Carmack. Come on. Hey, welcome.
Hi there. Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm excited to have you on here because the whole purpose of the show is to illuminate humanity. And I really wanted to share people how awesome you are and the things
Yay.
that you're doing in our world and specifically with children, right? So I think you're besides Tamara Barber with Extreme Teen Leaders. I think you're my second guest that's really focusing on our next generation, like our kids in this world. So before we get started, so people get to know you a little bit. So you're a licensed social worker, right?
Yep.
So for those of you who are watching, what does that mean? Like, what does a social worker do?
Yeah, so social work is actually a super broad field. Like you can be, that's one of the things that attracted me to working in social work in the first place is that I could be a therapist for 20 years and get tired of that and do something different and still be doing social work. Um, so generally, social work is about helping people in a variety of ways. And I'm a clinical social worker, so that's just a fancy way of saying a therapist. So there's like counselors, mental health professionals, like, and then social workers. So I do therapy.
And then you specialize in working with children and families, correct?
Yeah, so for a long time, I had a really specific specialty of infant and early childhood mental health. So, like, I capped my clients at 7. So I started at birth and I could see kids through age 7. And of course, they all come with grown-ups, or we hope they come with grown-ups. And um, it's certainly more family work.
Now, let me ask you this: with the profession that you're in and everything that's been happening, right? It's the year anniversary of the pandemic and
Yeah.
everything, like politically and in the world and the Black Lives Matter and all of that. Like, how do you see that affecting our youth today?
Hmm. Um, I mean, that's a great question. And actually, I think that it's like sort of challenging to answer because how kids are affected is super dependent on how their parents are affected. So kids don't exist in a bubble, right? And so they are, if they have more exposure to the news, if they have caregivers who are like super stressed, or being really profoundly impacted by what's going on in the world, then they're going to be more affected. And so I think that's a really big part of it. And that's sort of, there's been kind of like a natural shift in my practice since going entirely virtual, where like some kids are engaged, but I'm doing almost all adult and parent work now because it trickles down. Like if the parent is feeling um, more put together, like they have a safe space to let out whatever they need to let out, then the kids are doing better too. And that's very much like the foundation of my practice is that how the adult is doing is just as important as how the kid is doing.
Absolutely. I mean, because we've heard it for years, and we say that they do as you do, not as you say, right? So it's imperative, and so many times, I've heard people say, "I just wish I had a support system. I wish I knew this. I wish I knew that." What would you say to people that are watching that are looking for support? Or maybe don't know the resources on how to get with a social worker, or they might be having like a money conversation. What would you say to people that are looking for support out there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that one of the great things is there's been a really big push for having mental health be more accessible. So there are a lot of platforms now that offer reduced fee, especially like if money is part of it. And because mental health is still, it's like sort of like dental and vision, it's like not one of those guaranteed things that's covered by health insurance. And even if it is, like oftentimes high deductibles are part of it and copays and all this kind of stuff. So there are platforms like Talkspace, Better Talk maybe is one of them, but there are these online platforms where folks can sign up for therapy for a much lower cost. And there's
Mhm.
actually a great organization called Open Path, which sort of, contract is the right word for it, but like therapists sign up with Open Path going into an agreement that they're willing to charge lower rates because folks who are connecting through Open Path can't pay like the current market rates for therapy. So there are like several ways that folks can get connected. Um, One of the easiest is like going to a therapy directory. And there are lots of those available now. There's Psychology Today, Good Therapy, Therapy Den. So lots of ways you can get connected via just like a simple Google search.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
And when did you get started on this path? Like when did you say, hey, I want to be a social worker and I want to support our youth and families, and like what is it that inspires you to wake up and do this every day?
Um, so I mean, it's kind of a funny story because, um, well, funny like you laugh because you might cry kind of thing. But in my experience, people come to therapy like, or therapists come to therapy honestly. So they experience some hardship in their lives, which makes them want to be part of the helping. And that was certainly true for me. Like my parents divorced when I was young, and I can recall telling my mom when I was little that I wanted to grow up to be a therapist to help messed up kids like me. That was something that I said. And then I lost touch with that at some point. It didn't stay like my ultimate dream. Um, but then I went to college. After college, I did an AmeriCorps program, so I spent a year volunteering, and it was during college that I got really interested in early childhood stuff. Like I wanted to be a teacher, and I spent a lot of time in childcare programs and fell in love with the littles. Like it's such a magical time. It's so beautiful. And then through the AmeriCorps program, I started to like broaden my view a bit, that instead of working with individual children, I wanted to make a bigger impact. And it seemed to me like the bigger impact was on the family system, that like something more lasting could be achieved there. Um, so I went to grad school for social work. But the whole time, I didn't want to be a therapist. I avoided all of the clinical classes. I didn't know how to give a diagnosis when I graduated. Um, and then like the real story is that I needed to pay rent, and there was a place that was hiring, and so I all of a sudden I was a therapist, um, and I've been one ever since. And every time that I've tried to quit therapy, I've ended up being a therapist again. So it's what I'm supposed to be doing, and um, but I'm like especially interested in breaking intergenerational patterns, like, and that's why working with littles is so important, because that's they're learning a lot of really important lessons about themselves, about relationships, about the world, and so I love the work of helping parents change those patterns. I think sometimes I think about like I'm the person that I needed when I was little for the next generation of kids.
Sure. I think it's so important what you're saying is breaking those, those family habits, as I call them, right? Because how many times, we've heard, oh, well, I get this from my mom, or I get this from my grandparents, or this is just always the way that it's been,
Yep.
and it sounds like you have them step into the power of having choice for them in what serves them. And so how does one go about that, right? So like say there's a kid watching this right now, and maybe they're being challenged. And I used to be in education, and this used to come up all the time with some of the students of like, they didn't necessarily have the same opinions, right? As their parents, whether it's politics, religion, you name it. The older we get, those are the things that
Right.
maybe start to become like independent thought thinkers, as I say, um and I see so many times that they're afraid to do that, or if they do think differently than the family that they're brought up with, there's like a bad and wrong aspect of it to the child if they see things differently. So what would you say to people that are maybe having that with kids at a certain age right now, or kids that are frustrated, right? Like not letting them be their authentic self and stepping into their own thought process. What would you say to people that are watching right now?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is that it's so hard when somebody that you love is causing harm, and that's how it feels. Like I love them so much and I'm being stifled, or I love them so much and they really hurt my feelings. Um, and I oftentimes talk with folks about the dialectic, and the dialectic is that two things can be true at the same time. So rather than things being black or white, it's black and white. It's like a checkerboard kind of thing. So in the example of like family conflict, it's oftentimes the truth is that they're doing the best they can, and it's still not enough for me. They're doing the best they can, and I'm going to do something different.
Mhm.
Um, so oftentimes, like the healthiest place is getting to where we can see two things being true.
All right. Yeah, because absolutely, right? Because not one's better than the other. It's just finding their own. Now, through this work, right? And so you also have your private practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and where is that located?
My office is in Delray Beach, but I am licensed in Florida and North Carolina, so I can do telehealth statewide.
Yeah, is it true? I was reading the other day and I was like, wait a second, that's a whole other conversation. I'm like, was she a Tar Heel in undergrad and a Blue Devil in graduate school? Is that true?
The opposite.
Opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was like, ooh, how does that work out? Right. Go like I was like, ooh, that was brave. Because I know that's a big deal.
I
You
was
know, in Raleigh,
I was
Durham.
I confused a lot of people. Yeah, yeah.
But I was laughing and I'm like, I wonder if she wears both shirts sometimes, and who do you cheer for? And I'm like, that's a loaded question in the North Carolina area for sure. But
I know I'm gonna like alienate some people if I give my answer to that question.
it's almost
Um,
like in Florida, like, are you Gators or Seminole? It's kind of like that thing around here.
Yeah,
So
and I don't even know the beginning of that at all. I used to think that like I had a bumper sticker for both schools on my car when I lived in North Carolina, and so I was safe anywhere I went. Like I could be anybody's friend in
right.
North Carolina.
Smart.
Yeah.
Very, very, very smart. So you have your private practice, right? And you've been
Mhm.
doing this, and you say that it keeps bringing you back to this through the years and whatnot. And recently, you've been inspired to work on some new projects, right?
Mhm.
So one of those is the Ripples of the Healing Collective. So tell me about that. What is that, and what is your vision for that?
Yeah, so something I discovered moving into private practice. So in North Carolina, I lived up there for about 15 years. I've only been in Florida for like coming up on 2 years. Um, and so in North Carolina, I always worked like for community mental health agencies, and oftentimes um, community mental health is who sees like Medicaid clients, or I think in some states it's called medical assistance. And when a child qualifies for Medicaid, I mean, it's they sort of have this like amazing opportunity to have unlimited mental health services. Um, and considering all of the stress that goes along with being eligible for Medicaid, that makes a lot of sense. And but coming down to Delaware Beach, where I'm in private practice, I'm not contracted with Medicaid, and so I'm a private pay clinician, and that's in large part because um, our insurance system is just really messed up at the moment. And um, so I discovered that there is this massive gap between folks who had government subsidized mental health coverage and like super wealthy families who could just afford a therapy bill every month. And then
Sure.
there's everybody in between. Um, and and so there's like that reality. And the other one is that in the clinical world, there's sort of this natural progression where folks graduate and they go into a community mental health center and they work with those folks for a while, and then there's sort of the goal of moving into private practice, and in private practice everybody wants to be a pay clinician, and so those clinicians are usually the ones who have the most experience, the most training, and they're the most expensive. So so there's this like disconnect between folks being able to get and afford really high quality mental health care. And so my vision for the Ripples of Healing Collective is that it'll be a place where essentially folks can sponsor a child's mental health treatment. That there will be a network of providers who are experienced and well trained and um, sort of like share values around the benefit of mental health treatment for kids and how that might work and involving caregivers and all this kind of stuff. And that the collective would pay the difference between what a family can pay in and what the clinician would charge so that clinicians can have sustainable practices, families of all income levels can have access to high quality care. And it's sort of an opportunity, I see it as an opportunity for the community to come together and support one another. Um, and I really hope that it's a temporary initiative, that like eventually the system will fix itself such that therapists can have sustainable practices and everybody can get care, and we don't need as individuals to subsidize one another. Like that would
Right.
be great. um, but that's not what exists now. And so my I have this idea that if people have the opportunity, they would want to, that they would sponsor kids to get mental health treatment, especially at this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, because mental health, I mean, thank goodness over the years it's become like safer to talk about and more
Exactly.
socially accepted to talk about. I mean, growing up, forget about it. You heard anyone mental health, it was like a stigma,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like and families didn't talk about it if there were challenges, and kids got swept under the rug, in my opinion, going through the system. And it's such a, thank goodness it's come mainstream to talk about it and support groups and all of that stuff. And how many times people are just wanting to support people in a way to help. And absolutely, I think it's brilliant. What you want to create is to have people, it's almost like sponsor,
yep,
a kid to get mentally like sound in who they are, and to support them, because life and
yes,
life happens. So I think it's an amazing vision. And like you said, there's probably just organizations out there that might want to be their main focus even, but individual people. And I think more so, right? Because again, talking about the year anniversary of the pandemic and all of that, we saw mental health big time come up with people losing their jobs, with kids not in school, right? Like with the fear of
yep,
disease,
yep,
around there and stuff like that. And even substance abuse, like people relapsing, going back, but suicide. I mean, there were so many horrendous stories that I've read, and I'm like, man, if they only had somebody to talk to, a lot of that could have been preventive. And so many times it breaks my heart when finances
yep.
stop people, especially children, from getting the support that they need out there. So I think that vision for the Ripples of Healing Collective is brilliant, because I bet you anyone watching here is like, yeah, I would totally throw some cash, to support a child with their mental health.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
right. I mean, I'm certain of it, you know. I'm like totally certain of it. Um and I think you're totally right. Unfortunately, I still hear a lot of stories about like you know, family members really kind of sort of shaming others for being in therapy and that kind of thing. So like it's still there, the stigma is still there, but I think that you're totally right that there's like families overcome one stigma by saying like, you know what, I do need help. I can't manage this on my own, and asking for help is still a thing that's hard for lots of folks. And so once they've gotten over that hurdle, then there's the hurdle of like, oh, but I can't actually pay how much you're saying I need to pay, and I don't know how to ask for like a sliding scale or that kind of thing. Um, and there's the reality that like oftentimes clinicians have to put a cap on how many sliding scale or pro bono cases they can take because they have to pay their bills as well.
of course.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it feels like it's a, you know, everybody wins kind of thing. And I do feel this movement in the upcoming generations of wanting to rally and care for each other, and being open about talking about struggles. And there are more and more families coming up who are like choosing not to have children, and and yet I still think that people would want to care about the youth. Um, and the reason why I chose the ripples of healing is that I have this. It's something that it's been part of my spiritual practice for years. But just the idea that like you could pay in to support this one child, and this one child having more coping skills or feeling more connected or feeling more worthy, how big could that be? Like the ripples of that are, we can't, I can't even imagine how big that could be.
Right, not
um
only in their personal life, but like you stand for every day, generation on generation, that this idea of worthiness,
yep.
right, is coming into the context of the environment of them, which it can only radiate out into their children and their children, and so on and so forth. And that's what we were saying in the beginning, that it is absolutely able to break a habit, a pattern, a belief, right? Like that we actually can break that. We don't have to be our parents, right? Like we don't
Yep.
have to have the same thoughts, that we can actually say, this isn't going to happen in
Right.
my life going forward. And so, it does, it takes a community. And then I always say that I wish people, I'm 41 years old. So I always say, like, these are the people that are gonna like diaper my ass, right? Like when I'm old and gray, I want people that have compassion. I
Yeah.
want people that care for me, right? Whether whoever that be, family members, strangers, but people in the hospitals, that if I'm sick, this is the generation that's going to care for me,
Yep.
right? And so on and so forth. And the generations that are doing that now, to me, there is no shame in that game of seeing a therapist, because like even the word, I hate using this word, but like, oh well, crazy or unstable, or I need help. Why is that such a bad thing? And if you ask me, I think every human being should go to therapy. I'm just one
Oh,
of those
same.
people.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
and I mean, and the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that most therapists are in therapy too. I have a therapist, and I mean, we talk about like the grand therapist and the great grand therapist, like there's like a whole line of us supporting each other.
Yeah, it's like the
Um,
work I do, like being a transformational trainer. I'm like, and I have a coach, and
yeah,
they have a coach, and they have a coach, and it's like
exactly.
we actually do what we say, right? And we get the support that we say. And because it's something we joke around all the time in my work, is that like if everything was perfect, like we'd all be oming on a mountain, like just chilling out together with peace,
Right.
love, and happiness, and we wouldn't need that. But I always say, come on, man, give me a break. Like you had something in your life that's not working for you,
Yep.
that you could be like step into a different human being with.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, something that I've been just brings me back thinking about like therapists having therapists, that has been one of the things that has been especially challenging about the pandemic, is that this is the first time. I'm sure that other therapists who've been in practice longer than I have maybe experienced this, but this was the first time in my practice that I have been like sort of simultaneously experiencing a worldwide trauma, right? Like that, having to cope on my own and show up and help other people cope, like that's been a heck of a thing. um
I bet.
but then going virtually, like at first I was really opposed to it. I do terribly miss sharing space with people, sharing physical space and the energy exchange, and hugs from tiny kids and all that. But it is really cool that I can still see families in North Carolina and see them across the state. And I think that that goes to the ripples, like having a bigger impact. And that's just part of my. I want children to feel safe and capable and lovable, and for adults to feel capable of doing that for kids. um
100%. And I mean, I love what you're doing. I'm a fan. And I think because I worked with kids for 14 years too, I see that like when they would go see their therapists and come back, like what a different human being they were for 45 minutes, talking to somebody that wasn't their family, that wasn't their friends, that actually came from a neutral space,
yeah.
and I think your vision, the ripples of healing collective, I think is awesome. And I think that for sure people will donate to provide services for children that need to support. And and I think it's going to continue to break that stigma, is that it's okay to say that you need help sometimes, and that asking for help isn't a weak
Yep.
situation. It's like, I want to be the very best human being that I know that I can be, and not really caring about what other people think about you, because that alone, that breakthrough alone of not caring about what other people think of you is huge
Hmm.
as a human in general. Like being your authentic self is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other piece of it I think is allowing yourself to be cared for. Like when you enter into a therapeutic relationship, you're allowing yourself to be cared for by that other person, and I think that's another role of the collective too, is allowing yourself to be cared for, even like financially, and that's a piece where we don't talk about money in our culture, right? Like they're all like,
Money, politics,
yeah.
religion. Those were the three things growing up. Don't talk about them at dinner or with anyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just like taking away the stress of, and I can't afford this. I need help and I can't afford it. Like it's my hope is that it will just ease that for everybody involved.
Yeah, and how to peacefully coexist of having different opinions and seeing things differently. I mean, this last year was just amazing to me, to watch friendships end, to watch family members disconnect from each other due to, like, whether it's political, social, whatever, economic, right? Like
Mm,
differences. Like, it was fascinating to watch the separation, instead of being able to embrace different people's opinions, because not one person is right and not one person is wrong. Now, I might choose to invite certain people into my home, right? And that's up to me, but it doesn't mean that I don't respect you as a human being. And I think that that's important, because you're starting with our youth to have dignity, to have respect, but yet still stay true to who you are, and to not shift your beliefs based on who you're interacting with, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, your classmates, that you're actually choosing from your authentic self and your thoughts and what works for you. And I think it's worth $1 million what you do for people,
thank
so
you.
thank you for doing that. So not only are you working on establishing the ripples of the Healing Collective, you have your private practice right in Delray Beach, um, but you also just wrote a children's book, right?
Yeah.
So we can now say you're a children's author. Yay!
Yes.
That's exciting. So
It
it's not yet published, it's not yet ready for purchase, but it's written, and you're currently looking for an agent, publisher to get that out.
is.
Yes. So
Yep.
if you're watching and you're one of those people, hit her up, because she could
Yeah.
use your support on getting that out there. So tell me about the book. So what inspired the book? What is the content of the book, and what's it about?
Yeah, so the book is called My Magic Hands, and it's for like preschoolers. I have this vision of um, parents starting to read it to kids before they are really like even able to use the skill. So, anyways, My Magic Hands teaches a coping skill to kids. And so it's for like when a kid gets really angry and they might want to hit or pinch or throw something, that they have a way to regulate their body, so that they may not lash out in aggression. And so, I mean, we know that hitting is actually a really typically like it's what kids do when they're toddlers. They hit. They don't have a whole lot of cerebral cortex going on, and or ways to express themselves and all that kind of stuff. So they hit. Um, and so it's sort of like a helpful guide for parents to use in the moment with their kids. Um, and there's a little rhyme in it that goes, um, my I'm gonna forget my rhyme. I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, I forget
um,
things all the time. It's part of
I
being
know.
human.
Yeah. But the idea is that like hands are magic, do a lot of magical things. Hands like turn bubbles into beards and mud into pies, and that we lose our magic when our feelings get too big. If we get too mad, too sad, too scared, then we lose our magic, and we might hurt somebody. But that there's a way we can get our magic back by calming our bodies, and then hands go back to being magical.
Oh, I love that. Who doesn't want magic hands?
Right?
I would have been
Yes.
all over that as a kid. Even as an adult, I'm like, I want to read that story. You know,
Yeah.
look, I'm telling you, I taught preschool for a bunch of years and younger even. I used to do 6 weeks, believe
Yeah.
it or not, like
Yep.
6 weeks, and I did all the way up to 14-year-olds, right? Like that was my span. But I'm telling you, it starts an inception, right? Like with teaching that stuff. And I even have nephews, too, that they're now like, what are they, 10 and 6 now, and I can tell you that like the books that they're reading, the things that are being instilled in them, I'm seeing actually happen with the compassion, right, that they have for each other. And I'm sitting here going, man, I wish I had that book in my classroom when I
Yeah.
was a teacher, because so many times, like you said, they don't have that brain function yet to be able to problem solve. And so they go to these, like, the classic thing was that they'd either hit somebody, throw themselves on the floor, or throw something, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
throw something. And because they don't have that distinction yet in their mind to cope. And I'm thinking, like, how awesome would that have been if I could be like, oh, remember those magic hands, right? And bring it back
Yes.
to magic hands and all of that stuff. And what a great tool to support not only the kids, but the parents and families,
Yes.
and making it
Yes.
happen.
Exactly. Exactly. Because what if a family, instead of, if the scenario switched from don't do that to uh-oh, is your magic on? And like that is massive. That could be so massive. And I mean, the idea too is that like there are plenty of adults who don't have coping skills for when they're angry. And so the parent learns the coping skill, the child learns the coping skill, they can use it together, or the teacher and the whole class. Like it's, yeah. And I have, so my magic hands is written and edited and everything. It's like ready for somebody to believe in and pick up. Um, and I want to have my magic feet and teach a different skill, my magic words, like all of these ways for kids to cope.
The whole series.
The
I'm
whole
seeing it
series.
now. I'm seeing it in Barnes and Nobles in the children's section. I'm seeing it on Amazon. It's a New York Times bestseller. I'm seeing it, right? Like
Yes,
I'm
thank
seeing
you,
it
Chris.
happen because yeah, because it is important, right? It is important. And and I know you're gonna find the right person that believes in your vision and can see the difference that it's gonna make for kids being able to do that. And it is so important. And again, everyone has their own parenting techniques, everybody has their own thing, and there's so many different styles. But I always say that what doesn't go out is kindness. Right? Is kindness and love.
Yeah,
It's my intention that most kids would grow up in, and unfortunately not all of them do. But
yeah,
even if your book was to get like to their teacher and they were to read that, it could, like, I'm sitting here and I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it, because it could be that one book could have a kid go, oh wait, that I'm not supposed to be treated that way, right? Like that's not supposed to happen to me. So I'm even sitting here thinking about what a wake up moment it could be for a child to even like say to whoever might be doing something to them, like, hey, those aren't magic hands, and like maybe say something to a teacher or to a family member,
yep,
and then ask them, what do you mean? So you never know the impact that your book could be having. And like you said, that positive reinforcement, one of the best things ever in my classroom is, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right? So like, of course, I was never sent to the timeout chair.
oh no.
Of course I didn't. I just did it and they didn't see me do it, right? So I was that kid where I was like,
Yeah,
yes, got away with it, right?
yeah, yeah.
But I was very charming, right? I was very well behaved, but I was like, haha, they didn't see me do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so some of my elementary school teachers watch, and I always laugh because I'm like, oops, hey, how you doing? But that was me, the sneaky. But I think where I was going with this is that it's it's important, right? Like it's important to be able to have the positive reinforcement, because like I was saying, the timeout chair, to me, the timeout chair was like, ooh, you're in the timeout chair, or ooh, like you got in trouble for hitting or throwing or biting, right? And I can remember there was actually a moment where I was like, I don't even think that kid knows that it's wrong. Like, I remember thinking that, like, about this classmate, because I was like, I don't think he's been taught, right? Like,
Mhm.
what's wrong? Because I was like, there's no way. Like, and that was my judgment, like
Yeah.
coming out. But I'll never forget, like, when I learned and went to school and we turned the timeout chair into the thinking chair,
Mhm.
right? So we started to call it the thinking chair. And I was like, damn, where was that when I was a kid? Because it was like, okay, you're going to go sit in that chair and you're going to think about what got you in the chair, what steps took you to get here, the consequence that you pay, and you're going to sit there for the number of minutes how old you are. I was like, that's a brilliant technique, right? So if you're 5 years old, you sit there for 5 minutes. If you're 3 years old, you sit there for 3 minutes, because then they don't remember why they're sitting there
Right.
if
Yeah,
they're any
yeah,
longer. And
yeah.
then, like, but they always knew, you know what I mean? Because I'd be like, oh, you need to go on the thinking chair. You broke that rule, and they'd like pout, but it wasn't like a bad and wrong thing, and it was a positive situation that had them get excited, because I'd be like, did you think? And they'd be like, yeah. But it was like putting the ownership on them. And so your book to me is doing the same thing of like, oh no, I want to have magic hands. I can't do that,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. And the goal would be that I mean, kids that age need a lot of parent support. And there's actually a line in the book that says um, that a grown up can help you get your magic back because grown ups have magic hands too. And I think that that's part of it is like adults. I hope to bring a bit of that awareness back to adults too. And the calming should happen together, and ideally before the kid hits, right? Like, I see you getting angry, like, let's calm down, so that we never get to the point that another body is hurt, or something is
Yeah,
thrown
and have them
broken or
start to
whatever.
experience in their body
Exactly.
these feelings and sensations,
Yep.
like, like mine are always in my arms. I know when
Yep.
like I can feel it in my forearms. I'm like, "Woo, I'm getting heated,"
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I can feel it there, but I have that awareness to be able to feel that. And some of our viewers are, Marina saying it's wonderful what you're doing. Sharon is saying, I love that idea
Oh,
about
yay.
your stuff. My 2-year-old granddaughter would love that, right?
Yeah.
So there you go right there. And Erin May is saying, I can't wait until you're published so I can tell everyone about it. And then, oh, Sharon's saying fibber because she's a family member of mine. When I
Oh,
said,
yeah.
when I said I never was in that time out, Sharon. But the good thing is I ratted myself out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it is important because, like, even Sharon being a grandparent, it's such a valuable thing to be able to teach kids the coping skills and the coping mechanism, because let's face it, as adults, it's really our inner child that comes out when our
Yep.
ego is in full effect.
Right.
It's like a wound that was never healed from when we were a child. So to be able to impact children from a very young age is going to make all the difference for the relationships they have in their life, the experiences they have in the life, and even at jobs,
Mhm.
being able to cope at jobs. And it's important. It's
Yeah.
important that kids are being taken care of, emotionally and
Mhm.
mentally.
Yep.
100%. All right. So again, if you are watching, this book is written. It's
Yeah.
just sitting in a computer, right? It's sitting in a computer. It's ready. And she's just looking for the right person to come along and say, hey, I believe in your vision. I believe in you. Let's get this. It's all edited, ready to go and everything, right? We
Yep.
just gotta get it out there. So again, if you're watching and you believe in this vision and having it happen, please feel free to contact either one of us, because I'll make sure you get in touch with Halley if you don't know how to get in touch with her. Okay. Same thing with the Ripples of Healing Collective. It's not even up and running yet, right? Because it's happening. And here's what I want you all to understand. Another reason why she's on the show tonight. So not only like is she like a licensed social worker with her private practice, she's doing all of this stuff on top of that. Right. So she goes to work every day. She makes a difference in the world. She's healing children. She's healing families, standing for that, dealing, like she said, with all of the stuff, like of having to move her practice virtually, having to do all of that stuff, and even her life stuff. And then in the meantime, she's like, oh, wait, I want to make a difference. And I really want to make mental health affordable, right, for kids and their families. I'm going to find a way for people to sponsor, children, so that they get the mental health that they need. Oh, and on top of that, I'm going to write a children's book because I want to make sure that our youngest and most vulnerable ages are learning, about the magic of hands and thoughts, feelings, and sensations. So you're such a great example of what this show is about, that even though you have your stuff going on, right, that you stay focused on making a difference in the world and doing whatever you can to support your craft, and what you're up to. And nothing has stopped you in this crazy year. Nothing has stopped you. And I'm sure you've had some frustrations
A couple.
over the last year. So I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for being who you are in the world, and in creating a safe space for kids to be honest and authentic and who they are, and being accepted fully for all of who they are. The good, the bad, the ugly, the raw, the all of it. Because like, if everyone could just stop and think about, if everyone could just listen to people like you listen to people, because not everybody needs to be fixed. Sometimes they need to be heard and listened to with compassion,
Witness.
and not always having to have a solution.
Yep. Yep.
Right,
Absolutely.
but just an ear to be able to talk it out. And I know just that alone is worth $1 million, just to actually, like, their voice be heard on what their challenges are. So how can our people, right, that are watching, and they want to, like, buy your book when it's out and about, and maybe they want to sponsor a kid with mental health. So what's the social media platform they can find you on, and what's the name of that?
Yeah. So, I'm on all the things. I'm on Facebook under my business, actually, because that's a whole different story. But HMC Consulting is the name of my business, like, officially. So you can find me on Facebook there. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm Halley at Halley LCSW. My website is halleycarmack.com. The Ripples of Healing Collective does have an email address. It exists in email address form. So it's hello@ripplesofhealing.org. Um, and yes, I would, if you are interested in getting involved at the ground floor of this amazing, what will someday be an amazing nonprofit, I would love that. So please email me. And I'm just also super passionate about getting people connected. So I would love to have anybody reach out. If you want me to look at therapists for you on Psychology Today, I will do that. I want everybody to feel seen and supported. So I'm here for all of it.
You're amazing. And what we're going to do, because I know she said a lot of stuff,
I
because
did.
that's what happens when you're up to a lot of things in the world. You have like 10,000 things where you can hit her up. So after this interview, Hallie's going to go on and she's going to put all that stuff in the comments so that you can find all of that. And like she said, like, why not be on the ground floor of starting this nonprofit of providing mental health for kids that can't afford it. And you know who you are if you're able to support or know people that can have that happen. Buy the book when it comes out. And again, if you're a publisher, anything along those lines, an agent, hit her up, or somebody, send them her way, because I know I want my nephews to read it. I know I want all kids to read it. And you're amazing, and I know you're
Thank you,
super
Kate.
busy, and you worked right up until the show tonight. So I thank you for taking your time tonight and being on here. And as ever, I support everything that you're up to, and I'm so glad you're here and doing what
Thank
you
you.
do. So thank you
Kate.
very much. All right, everyone. Well, next week it'll be same bat time, same bat channel, 7 p.m., where I will have on another guest talking about illuminating humanity and making a difference in the world and being kind to one another, because that's what this is all about. So until then, have a great week, and I'll catch you all next week. Good night, everyone. Take care.